have your life choices framed your career? And I've asked them to take some time to maybe give us personal examples so that it's real to you listening to their stories. I'll start with Judy.
All right, thank you. Well, I struggled with how to answer this one, actually. So I'm going to share something that I guess really goes more to some of my fundamental beliefs about leadership, and because that's what ended up, I think, shaping my career, and I'll tell you a story in the process. I'm a firm believer that leadership is totally an inside job, and that often we're looking externally for how to get help or support or whatever, but it's actually an inside job that has to happen. And for me, I got tested on some of that pretty early. When I told you I was a liberal arts government major, I was not sure I wanted to be that, and so I kind of was testing all sorts of things, all sorts of majors, and I ended up deciding that it was a really good idea to take like upperclassmen level courses to see if I liked it, and then if I did, I would go back and take care of all those pesky prerequisites. This is not a path I would recommend, but it is the path that I did do. And so I found myself in a course called the Congress. And I walk in the door. I am the only sophomore with a group of seniors. I am the only woman with a group of men, and it was a total of like 8-10 people in the class. And I say men, young men, but they were actually kind of more like young bucks. They like were ready to sprout antlers and bash each other, and they were bold and brassy, and they were headed to law school, and they knew exactly what they wanted, and they were everything that I was not. And so this was a class where you ended up taking seminar style. You read the works, came in prepared to debate and discuss it, and that was your total grade. You didn't write a paper, you didn't anything. It was all on the quality of your thought and reasoning and logic and ability to connect ideas. So I go and I read the stuff. I come back to class, people start talking, and I think, I have no idea what these people are talking about. This has nothing related to what I read. I better read it again. So I go back and I read it again, plus the next assignment, and I come back the next time, and people are talking, and I'm thinking, maybe this is why you're supposed to take those pesky prerequisites, because it gives you a decoder ring to decipher what they are saying to what I read, because I am seeing no connection. And so I kind of struggle, and I keep kind of chiming in, but I'm very, very careful as I do go about that. Well, here's what happens. One day I found myself in a debate with the head of the Young Bucks. And I don't know how I got there, but I did. And it was a point that I felt strongly about, so I made my point, and he rebuffed me, and I kept going. And so we are going back and forth. Now, I do believe that you are either a flight animal or a fight animal, and I'll tell you I am a flight animal. And in this debate, I was pretty sure that someone was going to die. I was really hoping not me, and all those flight animal instincts kick in. The heart is going, I started, but I hang in there. And during the course of this debate, what became clear, I think that was always clear to the professor, became clear to everyone in the classroom, and eventually even became clear to me, was that this guy had no idea what he was talking about. He had not even read the material. And that became obvious. So here is, the little flight animal cornering the buck and going, oh my God, what happened here? Well, what he did was he ended up sitting back in his chair, pushing back, glaring at me and saying, dumb female dog that rhymes with rich. That's what got said. And bell rings, class is over. Now, there's a lot of things you can take from a situation like this. I'll tell you what I did. And I'm going through this story because it really, really shaped me. Never, ever undervalue your own contribution. Just never do it. I'm going to say that again because I think it's so important. Just never, ever undervalue your own contribution. I had been in that room and I did not contribute what I thought. And not only had it been not doing me a service, I was not doing my job, which was to come in and share what I thought. I think I felt like I stuck out so much in that group that I wasn't going to stick out anymore by maybe sounding dumb or having a contrary view, so I will go along. And that's what I did the first, 3-4 weeks of that class until that happened. And then when I realized that I had been shaping and contorting myself to fit in with someone who hadn't even done the work, really? And I'll tell you, I look out in the workforce a lot of times and I see that. I see people who don't stand up and actually say what they think. And I know there's lots of things you could say, even about that class I took, that would say, oh, you know, there should have been more women. We need to recruit more women. We should have done more to mentor. We should have a more conducive thing. And the fact is, that's all good stuff, but it is a marginal impact to what had to happen to me inside. And all I can say is, once I became convinced of the value of my own contribution and that I was going to make it, I might not be right all the time, but I'm convinced of its value, everything got better. Just everything got better.
Judy, thank you. And how have life choices framed your career?
Well, I was actually going to cover a slightly
you can do whatever
different.
You want.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on what Judy said because I have some thoughts about that, and I completely agree with it. I was going to go to a different way, but I'm going to talk about this. And this really echoes what we heard from Julie this morning, and this notion of having your voice heard. And it is hard, and there are reasons and experiences why people don't hear us. And I had actually an experience more recently in my career where I had taken a position. I'm going to keep it fairly general because it's somewhat still current, but taken a position on a particular issue. And it's not a position that's shared widely within my company. And I'm kind of the new kid on the block in the senior team among our company. I'm a new president and a new not a new executive, but a new senior executive. So my instincts are to kind of just lay low, keep your head down. I am also the prey animal and not the predator. And I'm a vegetarian, so that it all kind of fits in. In fact, our CEO, John Rowe, said to me one time, we were coming back from Springfield, our capital, after doing some pretty heady work at the legislature, and he said, if anybody would have told me my regulatory person was going to be a tea-drinking vegetarian, I never would have believed him. In any event, so having an experience where I had taken a position that was not widely held throughout the company, and being in several meetings where I took some pretty serious heat for raising these issues. And one meeting in particular was very difficult, and all the senior executives were there, and I literally was the only one with this view. And I went home that weekend, it was a Friday, and I had a good glass of wine, and I really had to sort of ask myself, because I thought it was really, I was in a career-limiting situation, and maybe even more dramatic than that. And I said to myself, do I really think that I'm right on this? And I kind of went back. I mean, this is a multi-year thought process for me. It wasn't something I just came up with. I've been working on this for years. And I kind of went back and looked at my thinking and, talked to a few people and sort of checked in on myself. And by the end of the weekend, I had decided that I was right. And I was just going to be there on this. And I really am a prey animal. So to make the decision that I was going to be out there on this was pretty tough for me. But I kind of decided, my answer to Julie's problem, how do you get your voice out there, was I was going to go out on it one way or the other, and I was just going to take it. And I could, end up not being in the position that I'm in. I could, a lot of things could happen to me, but I really, truly believed that I was right, and I really, truly believed that position, that thinking needed to be heard, and I had to get my voice in there. And I came back and I basically told everybody, I know you don't agree with me, but I'm right on this, and I'm sticking with it. And, I've sort of held that position since, and I think that, leadership, and we are all leaders, is about finding, your voice, finding that position, and holding on to it. And it doesn't mean you don't do gut checks. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you can't be influenced by other people's thinking. You should be. You should always be open to it. But that, sort of sticking with it, that getting out there is really important. And so I just wanted to throw that experience in because I think it echoes what Judy just said.
Good, thank you, Anne. Annette?
Well, I think I'll talk a little bit about two different life choices I made that really shaped my career. The first one was that I was 17 when I started in the engineering program in the 70s at Michigan Tech. And I was one of very, very few women in my curriculum at the time. And so I learned at 17 that you have got to stand up for yourself. Because believe me, there was the gloves were completely off. They were trying to derail you from what you were doing. There was no thin cloaking of political correctness. It was a very aggressive interaction between me and my classmates. Everybody knew who I was. Everybody knew my name. I was almost always the only woman in the class. And I'm kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. That just gets my back up. I am an aggressive person. In fact, that's something I've had to learn to control and to keep in check, because it can be a detriment to getting where you're trying to go. So I learned that balance. You know, by the time I graduated, classes were pretty small. You know, we might have only had 15 or 20 people in the class. I knew the people in the class really well. We developed good working relationships, and that has never left me, that experience. You know, my summer internship when I was 19, I walked through a factory with 300 people. Guys took their shirts off, swung them over their heads, and shouted all kinds of things. I'm sure there are other women in engineering or in other non-traditional female roles in the same time period as me who had these same experiences. I totally believe it was not unique. But that was the environment that I started off my career in. So I learned a lot very early on, and I have spent my whole career working pretty much with men. Every single one of my direct reports is a man now, and that is something that I would really like to see changed, because I think that the diversity of having other people on your leadership team is a huge plus. I just need to find that right person when we have another opportunity that comes up. The second life choice I made, and I was talking to a young lady on the bus yesterday, and she was sharing her desire to start family. And so the other life choice that I made was that I decided to stay home with my son. So I had graduated from college, I worked for a couple of years, and I decided to stay home for 2 years, and after 2 years, I started working for my father-in-law. And so it was a family business, and we were kind of getting it up and running together. And then when he was about 5, I decided I'm going to try to get back into the workforce. He's starting school. It's time for me to get my career back on track again. Well, this was the early 80s, and I could not get a job interview to save my life. I honestly tried every possible way that I could think of. I couldn't even get past the front door. So what I did do was I applied to Mishcon. My brother-in-law worked there. I applied to Mishcon, and they didn't have any openings. But I knew that they promoted from within. So when they finally called me for a position interview about a year later, I went and interviewed for the position. The skill set that I needed was to be able to type 68 words per minute. I couldn't type. So in a matter of a few weeks, I think I wore my nails off, but I learned how to type. And I went in and I took all the tests that they gave at the time. And I got a job in, I think it was benefit accounting, which, by the way, was invaluable. I learned a tremendous amount in that area of the business, and it's helped me ever since then. But what I did after that was, at the time, I don't know how it is now, but at the time you had to stay in a position 6 months before you could post on another job. So I worked in that position for 6 months. And then I went down and started talking with the manager of engineering. And he said, you know, I told him I was a civil engineer, what I had done on Enrico Fermi 2, and talked a little bit about that, and that I would love to get back into engineering. And he said, well, you know, I don't have anything right now. He said, well, why don't you come back in a month? So in a month, I went back, and we sat down, and we talked about the projects that he was working on and other things going on. Well, don't have anything right now. Come back in a month. So it was about 6 or 7 months later, and we had been meeting every month. He had an opening come up. So, and this guy was a great guy. So I interviewed for the position, and you know, he later told me this. He was in the decision-making portion. We had peer interviews, everything went great. And his boss at the time told him, oh, don't hire her. She has no ambition. Now, I have seen this man. I know some of you in this room know this man, so I'm not going to name him. I have seen this man throughout my career in different venues, and we have run into each other over and over again.
And I think to myself every time I see him, gosh, you know, he only made it to vice president. It's a shame. He had no ambition.
Thank you, Annette. You know what? I'm going to start out with you and work our way down for a little bit of a switch, and so that they can't take all the good stuff and leave you at the end.